In today's episode, you'll learn thousands of expressions of exaggeration and hyperbole so that you can make your English more colourful and engaging. Well, maybe not thousands. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig, the greatest ever podcast in the history of podcasting.
I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with nearly 500 years, 60. With nearly 60 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you doing, Craig?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm excited to be speaking about exaggeration and hyperbole with you today, and everything's good my end. How about you?
Great. I'm looking forward to it. Do you think this could be the best podcast ever?
I think you might be exaggerating just slightly there, Reza. We'll look at some expressions and some phrases that you can use to exaggerate in today's podcast. But before that, we've received a message from friend of the show, Walter from Belgium, who has moved to Italy. So he's now Walter from Italy.
Hi, Craig and Reza. It's Walter from Italy right now. Actually, I moved to Italy last week because I got my bachelor degrees in Belgium a few weeks ago. Then I moved to here for my master degree. So from now up to at least 2027, I hope you should say Walter from Italy. I wanted to send you this voice message since a while, but I was so busy. I think my last message was in January before my internship in Netherlands. Since then, I have been so busy with a lot of stuff, but now I hope that I will be a bit more free. I keep listening to your fantastic podcast. Very good one and so useful. And I hope that you will continue your great job. By the way, I would like you to do an episode about the differences between angry and hunger. For instance, if I say I'm hungry and I'm starving, is it the same thing? Because to me, I think that I'm starving means that I can no longer support the need to eat something. Or is there any other differences? Please let us know about these technical details. And the second couple of words are the difference between gambling and playing. Because I watched a video long time ago, there were a young guys who was riding dangerously a motorbike without any protection. And there were another man who said he is gambling with his life. I didn't catch why he said gambling instead of playing. Please let us know about these technical things and have a lovely week. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Walter from Italy, formerly Walter from Belgium, but now from Italy. Thanks so much for your message. Congratulations on getting your bachelor's degree.
Yes, well done.
Your message, as ever, is very, very clear. Really good pronunciation. But I think there's one or two things we could maybe improve. Do you agree, Craig?
Yes, it's lovely to hear from you again, Walter, and I'm pleased things are going well, and I hope you're enjoying the food over there in Italy. That's absolutely wonderful. But you did say in your message when you thanked us for the podcast, and thank you for your kind words, you said continue with this great job. I would say continue with your great work. So I would use work there instead of job. Jobs tend to be individual, countable things. And you're talking about the work in general that we do. So thank you for the work you do.
I think another thing you said, Walter, was I've wanted to send you this voice message since a while. but it would be correct to say for a while, because a while is a period of time. And when you're talking about a period of time, a duration, you say for. Since refers to a moment in time. For example, I've been here since Wednesday, or I've been here since 1972, or I've been here since 11 o'clock.
He could have said, I've wanted to send this message since January.
Exactly, which is for a while. Yep, so since January, for a while.
And you asked about a couple of words, but it's a bit confusing because of your pronunciation. Now, we noticed this with some French speakers. The H at the beginning of the word sometimes gets dropped and not pronounced. So when you said hungry, it sounded like angry. There's also a slight difference in the vowel sound. Angry is the A sound, the same sound as in the word cat or hat or that. So angry. And hungry has the first sound, which is aspirated, like you're cleaning your sunglasses and you breathe on your sunglasses. That's the sound you want to make. And the vowel sound is a, not a. So it should be hungry, hungry. The adjectives are angry and hungry, and the nouns are anger and hunger. For example, there's a lot of hunger in Sudan, in South Sudan at the moment.
You also refer to the word starving. So starving is an adjective ending in ing. So it's similar to hungry, but I would say more extreme. Would you agree, Craig?
Definitely. If you're starving in the literal meaning of the word, then you are close to death because you have nothing to eat. For example, there are starving children in Darfur at the moment, and the noun is starvation.
Another thing you asked about, Walter, was gambling and playing. Well, they're not the same thing, although there are a few situations where you could use either. Imagine...
in a casino, maybe.
In a casino, yeah. Or imagine you're playing Russian roulette, you know, that crazy game where you've got one bullet in a gun and you point it to your head and pull the trigger, and maybe there's a bullet, maybe not. Whenever you fire the gun, you're playing with your life. But you could also say you're gambling with your life. In that situation, it wouldn't really make a difference. But there are other situations where it does make a difference. For example, you play football, you play a game. You don't gamble plus a game. No, you play a game. To gamble means specifically to take a risk, and very often for money, you could win or lose. So that's similar to play. When you play a game, you take a risk. So sometimes they're interchangeable words, sometimes they're not.
And it also depends a lot on collocation. So you've got verbs and nouns that like to go together. So you gamble with your life, with the example with the boy on the motorbike. You can also say that he's playing with fire because those words like to go together. They like to collocate. Or you can say he was tempting fate, which is another strong collocation.
So if you want to know a little bit more about these adjectives which are strong, such as starving, yeah, you could go to episode 76. Wow, that was a long time ago.
A few years ago, mate.
We got a link in the show notes. To go to any episode, it's always the same. You just need to type in inglespodcast.com/ and then the number of the episode. In this case, 76.
And another episode we did, which would help you with this topic, is gradable and ungradable adjectives. Adjectives that we can use other words to make them more extreme, and adjectives that are already extreme and they don't accept any gradable words. For that episode, go to inglespodcast.com/508.
And talking about extremes, let's get started with our main topic for this episode, exaggeration and hyperbole.
So what is hyperbole exactly? Well, hyperboles are great. They're wonderful for making speech a lot more colourful, a lot more expressive. Hyperbole is a way of speaking or maybe writing that uses extreme exaggeration to make something sound a lot stronger, to make something sound a lot funnier, or even more dramatic than it really is. For example, I could say, I'm so tired, I could sleep for a year. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to sleep for a year, like a bear hibernating. It just means that I'm very, very tired.
And going back to the word that Walter mentioned, starving, that's a word very commonly used if you want to exaggerate. In other words, if you're using hyperbole. So as Walter suggested, if you're starving, that means you cannot continue any longer without eating. But sometimes people say that. They say, oh, I'm starving, but they're not going to be ill. They're not going to die, really. They're not like the poor people in Darfur that Craig mentioned who really are going to die if they don't eat immediately. It's just a hyperbolic way of saying I'm very hungry.
Have you heard the expression, I'm starving hungry?
I've heard people put them together as well.
Sometimes goes together. Now, that's what you say when you're very, very hungry. But what about if you're very, very thirsty and you really, really need a drink? Well, you could say that you're dying of thirst. Now, that doesn't literally mean you're walking in a desert somewhere. There's no water for 5 days. No, you're not literally dying of thirst. It's just a way of expressing an extreme feeling. I'm dying of thirst.
And there's a couple of other common expressions for how you feel your body. For example, I'm freezing. Well, that would mean that your body's under 0 degrees, technically. But of course, if that were the case, you'd probably already be dead. You wouldn't be able to say anything. So if you say, I'm freezing, you haven't really frozen yet. It just means that you're very, very cold.
Yeah, I'm thinking of my friend Martin, who's on the conversation course at the moment, who lives in Poland. And in the winter, if he goes outside with very few clothes, he might say, I'm freezing, and literally freeze. But it just means you're very cold.
And in Valencia, we often say in the summer that we're boiling. We haven't been put in water at 100 degrees temperature, but it does feel like that because when there's about 80% humidity and it's 42 degrees, it feels like you're being boiled like a potato in a saucepan. So it just means you're very, very hot. You're not literally boiling.
Let's take a quick break here because I know you listen to this podcast to take your English to the next level. But what about your speaking? Is your fluency improving? Are you happy with your speaking skills? My conversation course focuses on making you a more confident and more fluent English speaker. You'll join me and a small group of motivated students, and we'll meet on Zoom and have topical discussions, role plays, debates, and presentations that will expand your vocabulary and help you express yourself effectively in English. So be proactive and take the first step towards becoming a confident and fluent English speaker. Send me an email today to craig@inglespodcast.com and I'll send you details of the next online conversation course. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the podcast. I went shopping with my wife yesterday. We went to the greengrocer to buy some vegetables, things like onions, potatoes, sweet potato, things that weigh a lot. And when I lifted the bag, I said to her, wow, this bag weighs a ton. It didn't literally weigh a ton. It just felt very, very heavy. So if something weighs a ton, that's an extreme way of saying it's really heavy.
Sometimes if you're in a situation where it's really, really quiet, someone might say, oh, you could have heard a pin drop.
Bing.
That sound that Craig made, ping, would you really hear that? If you were in a big, big room, would you really, really honestly hear if someone dropped a pin?
Well, what's a pin?
You might. What is a pin? Good question. So a pin is a very, 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 very small and thin and sharp piece of metal used for
dressmaking,
doing things with clothes. So it's very unlikely if you're more than about, 2 or 3 meters away from the pin that you're going to hear it. It's very unlikely. So when I say to you, you could have heard a pin drop in that room, actually you probably couldn't, but you get the idea. It was so quiet that imagine you really could hear that pin hit the ground.
Reza, I've told you a million times not to exaggerate. That doesn't mean I've said that to Reza a million times. It just means I've told him many times. I've told you a million times to tidy your room. I've told you a million times to wash the dishes.
Quite often people say I'm broke whenever they have no money. But it doesn't mean that they're like absolutely destitute and they're on the street. It's perhaps just an exaggerated way of saying, look, I haven't got any extra money, can't do anything, can't buy anything. I just about have enough to live. People will say, I'm broke.
You can describe having a lot of work by saying, I've got a mountain of work to do. Not a literal mountain, it's idiomatic, but it means you have a lot of work. I'm really, really busy. I can't meet you for coffee. I've got a mountain of work to get through.
Another common exaggeration is to say that something is faster than the speed of light. For example, if my friend runs very fast, I could say he runs faster than the speed of light. He could win the Olympic Games, faster than the speed of light.
If you have a very bad day at work, you can say it's the worst day ever. Now, you're not really meaning that it's the worst day ever. You're just saying it was a very bad day. So how was work today, Craig? Oh, it was the worst day ever.
If you've heard or seen something very funny, and therefore you laugh a lot, you might hear people say, I laughed my head off. Can you imagine laughing so much? Wow, that your head somehow drops off? It's not going to happen, is it? You're not going to laugh so much that your head literally drops off. But people say it. They say, I laughed my head off. They also say, I wet myself. Wet meaning I urinated myself. I laughed so much that it made me urinate. You can also say, I pissed myself. To piss, P-I-S-S, is a slightly vulgar way of saying urinate. So I pissed myself. I wet myself. I didn't really have an accident in my trousers, but imagine that I did because I laughed so much. By the way, I know a couple of people who really do wet themselves sometimes when they hear a joke. I do know people who do it. So it's based on fact. It's extremely rare, but it is possible that if you laugh excessively, you urinate yourself. And I know 2 people that it happens to, actually.
Is that because they tend to be old people who
It really can happen to you.
The bladder gets weaker, doesn't it, as you get older?
So in most people's case, it's purely hyperbole. Occasionally, for very old people, it can actually be technically true.
That reminds me of the abbreviation ROFL that you sometimes see on the internet and in messaging platforms. It means rolling on the floor laughing. If somebody says something really funny and you write ORFL, that doesn't mean you're literally rolling on the floor with laughter. It just means that you find it very funny.
Craig, I imagine quite often just before podcasts that were to start at 11 o'clock, but it's 20 past 11, you think, I've been waiting forever for Reza.
Yeah, when's he going to come?
Mm-hmm.
Not exactly arriving faster than the speed of light, you could say. But if you say, I've been waiting for Reza forever, I've waited a long time. You might hear the expression, my hands are killing me, my feet are killing me. That doesn't mean that your hands are strangling yourself and your hands around your neck. It just means that they're very painful. So if you hear the expression, my head's killing me, then the person has a very bad headache. If you hear the expression, my back's killing me, the person has a bad back. My arm's killing me, my leg's killing me, etc. It hurts a lot.
So parts of your body using hyperbole can kill you. And another type of hyperbole is when you could kill for something. For example, imagine I'm a heavy smoker. I smoke 50 cigarettes a day. Right now, I haven't got any.
Or you're on an aeroplane, you get off the aeroplane after a long journey.
A long journey where they don't let you smoke. So you get into the airport and you say, oof, I could kill for a cigarette right now. I could kill for a cigarette. I'm not really going to kill someone just because they have a cigarette and I don't. It just means I'd really love a cigarette right now. But we often exaggerate by saying, I could kill for something.
And how many times after a long day at work, Reza, you get home and you say, I could murder a pint?
Yes, which of course is the same as kill, isn't it? Yeah, I could murder a pint. I could murder a drink. Yeah.
If something is older than the hills, it means it's very, very old, because geography is old, isn't it? A mountain's old, but we don't use mountain, we use hill, which is a small mountain. So if you see somebody on the street or you're talking about someone who's very old, you could say she's older than the hills, or he's older than the hills, very old.
Now, if a friend of yours has just come back from a holiday in Monaco and you ask them what were prices like, there's a fair chance they might say, it cost me an arm and a leg. But you see that they still have both their arms and legs. Nothing has been amputated. It's just an exaggerated way of saying it was very expensive. If it cost you an arm and a leg, it was very expensive.
When was the last time you went to a restaurant that cost you an arm and a leg?
Ooh, a long time ago, actually. Ooh, about 10 years ago. About 10 years ago, maybe. And you?
Probably less than that. I'd say a couple of months ago when I was on holiday. I went to a restaurant that was quite expensive.
How much?
And it cost an arm and a leg.
Are you prepared to say how much?
I think it was about 45 euros per person.
Oh, right. No, that's not too bad. No, when I said 10 years ago, I'm talking about 90 per person.
Oh, wow. I don't think I've ever spent that much money on a meal.
Yeah, it really did cost an arm and a leg, yeah.
Was that including the wine?
One glass of wine, I think it included.
Wow, expensive. I can remember the first time I ever stood up in front of an audience and gave a presentation. I was very, very nervous. I was speaking to 80, 90 people. Everyone was looking at me, and I could say that I was shaking like a leaf. You find leaves on trees, and when the wind blows, the leaves shake. So if you describe yourself as shaking like a leaf, that means you're very, very nervous. You're very maybe cold as well. If you're living in Poland or similar cold countries and you go out without a coat, you could start shaking like a leaf. That means you're very cold. You're freezing. Reza, have you ever been bored to death by a film?
Yes.
But you're still alive.
Yes. So there was no fear of genuine death, but I just thought that I'd rather do anything than watch this film. I was bored to death. Or sometimes you hear I was bored to tears as well. Don't you, like crying? Bored to death or bored to tears by something. What about you? Have you ever been bored to death by a film?
Many times, yeah. In fact, I've even walked out of the cinema because I was bored to death by a film, and I paid money to see it. But we hope you haven't been bored to death by this podcast. I do have a million jokes about hyperbole, but I have spared you. I don't want to bore you to death with my horrible jokes. But now it's your turn to practice your English. Can you think of any more examples of hyperbole? If you can, we would like to hear them. Please send us a voice message and tell us what you think, or send us a voice message and practice some of the expressions that you've learned in this episode. Reza, how can people get in touch?
Well, probably the easiest way and the best way is to send us a voice message. And you can do that through SpeakPipe. There's a link in the show notes. It's speakpipe.com/English podcast. However, if you prefer to send us an email, you could do that. You've two options. Send it to craig@englishpodcast.com or belfastreza@gmail.com.
If you're a Spanish speaker and you want to improve your English with free and paid resources, visit the Mansion Inglés website at mansioningles.com. And for paid products, you can browse the online store at store.mansioningles.net. As
always, we'd like to say thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. And if you join the Patreon program as a donor and you donate a little bit of money to the podcast, as a way of saying thank you, you get instant access to the audio transcriptions of all the words of the podcast and the possibility of live Zoom chats with Craig so that you can practice your speaking. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, have a look at the link in the show notes, which is patreon.com/inglespodcast.
And before we say goodbye, we'd like to say thank you to our most recent Patreon sponsors. Unfortunately, we don't have time to mention all of you lovely people, but we will say hello and thank you to Sonia, who has joined recently, and also long-time listener Manuel del Olmo. Thank you both very much. And thank you to everybody who is keeping this podcast going. Remember, you can see all of the vocabulary and the expressions we've spoken about today in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/593. Reza, what are we going to talk about next week?
Next week, and I am not exaggerating, we will be talking about the most read book in the history of humankind.
Harry Potter?
No, the Bible.
Oh, wow.
Even more read than Harry Potter. Can you believe it? Our title is Wisdom from the Bible. So it'll be about some quotes to help you live your life well.
Look forward to talking about that with you next week, Reza. Until then, have a lovely week. Thank you for listening to us today. Take care of yourselves. It's goodbye from me.
And it's bye-bye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.